it seems to me that Oregon has shown up to be what we all thought they might be able to do or be at the preseason. Like, I'm looking at this program, and they won every game they played, but they've looked particularly awesome in the last couple of games, and they've scored at least 31 points in each of the last 4 games. They're rounding into the kind of program that we thought they could be, not unlike Texas this year. And right now, got a hard time looking past Oregon, Texas as a potential national championship matchup, depending on what Texas does against Georgia on Saturday night. We're doing this late on Friday night as Oregon stopped a mud hole in Purdue and walked dry. One of the things I want you to take into account here is just how good the Oregon pass defense was against a Purdue passing attack that at least looked pretty damn good in the second half against Illinois last week. Ryan Brown threw for 297 yards against Illinois last week and helped that offense score 40 points in the second half. Tonight, 64 yards. It didn't matter who was at corner or safety. Those guys were flying around. And I realize there's a depth chart for a reason, but the level of play that Taj Lupoi was able to get from that defensive front, from that defensive secondary, was phenomenal against Purdue on the road. I want to point that out again because it's the second game in a row where they really don't have Jordan Burch. Imagine what happens when they get Jordan Burch to join guys like Mateo Uiagalelei. And I think we're getting to a space where we got to talk about Desmond Harmon as being one of the great defensive linemen in the sport, alongside guys like Josiah Stewart at Michigan, Kyle Kennard at South Carolina. We can keep going down the list because they get easier and easier to identify as we get into the second half of the season. But they're 7-0, and I think they have done enough to prove to others, I already have them as the number 1 team in the country, that they can be the number 1 team in the country if Georgia defeats Texas. Now, I also think that if Georgia were to beat Texas by a lot, and by a lot, I mean double digits, we could see Georgia vault back to the number 2 spot. But with that loss to Alabama, it's really difficult. I think this is really Oregon sitting and waiting. And right now, as I've said all year, I could see 6 different teams being the number 1 team at some point during the season, right? We've already had Texas. We've had Alabama. We've had Georgia. We're probably going to have Oregon before long. They got Illinois next week. They got Michigan the following. And then it looks like they're a shoo-in for the Big Ten championship game. We're still waiting to find out if Indiana and Penn State are as real as their records would indicate. Big game for Indiana on Big Noon against Nebraska at home. They need the win to keep their Big Ten championship hopes alive, which is not a thing that any of us expected to be saying at the start of the season, right? Nebraska also looking to get to bowl eligibility, but I want to stick with Oregon for just a little bit longer here before we get into, I think, another subject. But I was really impressed with Dylan Gabriel again, 21-25 for 290, right? He threw the pick, but I'm also looking at a guy who is in full control and full command of that offense. It doesn't look like there's anything you can do that is going to catch him off or catch him out. And they're winning one-on-ones on the outside like you read about. Like, it's one thing to talk about Tez Johnson. Evan Stewart has really come on. I think we didn't see Trayshawn Holden for a reason, right? You spit on somebody in a national championship, in a nationally televised game, there should be some consequences for it. But the point there is that they didn't really need him, right? Jordan James was awesome. So was Noah Whittington with that particularly awesome catch that he made off his face mask there toward the end. But I was really impressed by Jay Harris. And the reason I was really impressed by Jay Harris is I'm like, I know that dude. Why do I know that dude? Northwest Missouri. He was D2 All-American, and he transferred to Oregon because they just got dudes like that up and down the depth chart. Dan Lanning was not lying when he looked into the camera and said, hey, if any of y'all see any good players around, tell them to come to Oregon, because that's what they're doing right now, man. They're tough. They're nasty. They want it. They're unafraid. And they were taking this Purdue game so seriously coming off of a monster win against Ohio State. They refused to let happen to them what happened to Alabama after they defeated Georgia and went to Vanderbilt, and they took that L. They said, no, we're not doing that. I love the story that was related by Brando and Devin, where they said, look, we had Tysheem Johnson jump up till, like, coach said we're going to go in shells. He's like, no, coach, we hitting. Like, forget all that. We ain't come this far to be slacking just a little bit because we on a short week. Nah, coach, let's go hit somebody. And that's what they did against Purdue. They hit somebody. It is very clear to me that Oregon is not only looks like a top 2 program, but they're functioning like one. Like, when people say that Dan Lanning is bringing the SEC to Oregon, SEC to the Big Ten, this is what they mean, right? It's one thing for Will Stein to be calling these plays that have dudes running butt naked open. It's another for them to go, fourth down, we're going for it. And we're going for it. We're running the ball. We're coming over your dead body. I thought that particular possession where Jordan James scored 3 times, 2 rushes and 1 pass to get 1 TD was indicative of who this program has become in the short time that Dan Lanning has been there. I really got a hard time looking at anybody not named Ohio State, Texas, or even Georgia giving them a hard time. Everybody else, they should be going away, which is why the start was so boggling. I had them on fraud alert. And then you look and you go, okay, Ashton Genty's good, but you gave up 87 rush yards to Travion Henderson. Tonight they gave up a ton in rushing, but on the other hand, they had the twos in for basically the second half, right? I think you can still run the ball on that defense. I think when Jordan Burch gets back, that probably changes a little bit. And we could talk about Jeffrey Massa and what that dude means to them, but I'm over the moon about what those dudes have been able to be, especially after I get to see them play somebody who was good. Like after the Ohio State game, I'm like, all right, cool. Forget what we saw earlier against getting vandalized by Idaho and perhaps losing to Boise State, or Boise State basically they need to win that game on the last possession, on the last play of the game. That's the reason we're talking about Boise State like a Group of 5 champion that could be the highest ranked, and one of the reasons that Ashton Genty still has all of our eyes. I think that Oregon is going to be one of those teams that we talk about well into December and into January playing for the national championship. They're that good. I know that it's Purdue. I realize that, but they are as good as I thought they would be by this point. Meanwhile, I'm looking over at Florida State, and I'm asking what is going on over there. So I realize that we don't usually like to talk about 2 teams and 2 games in the same segment because y'all hate it, but I need to do it right now because I think the juxtaposition between Florida State and Oregon is fascinating. Oregon has been ascending and ascending and ascending. We think Oregon is on the same trajectory that Texas has been on for the last couple of years. Florida State felt like they were there last year, right? And it felt like they got robbed of the opportunity to play in the college football playoff, first by their quarterback getting hurt, and Jordan Travis, and then by the selection committee. Quarterback doesn't get hurt, you probably are in that Bama spot playing against Michigan in the Rose Bowl. However, this year, we thought at the very least as a top 10 team, I thought as a top 5 team, I was wrong, we were wrong, and they have done nothing but slide. They are 1-5. They have lost to Duke. Now, I realize that Duke is 6-1, and Manny Diaz is coaching his behind off, but it's Duke, and Florida State doesn't lose to Duke. And more than that, Florida State does not get off to its worst start to the first half of football season since 1975. That means that Mike Norvell has done something that Bobby Bowden never did, because Bobby Bowden arrived at Florida State in 76. They're 1-5, and they got Miami and Notre Dame left. This is not rock bottom for them. It can get worse. It can get so much worse. And I was watching that game on the second screen, and I'm looking, wait a second, did I just see what I saw? Yeah, I did. I saw a pick 6 from Brooklyn. I saw a fumble, and I saw an interception. 3 consecutive offensive plays. I mean, you could have told me that was Jackson Arnold playing for Florida State at the time, dog. Like, what you gonna tell me? And for what they spent on that defensive line, what they spent on the portal, just to get guys in there that they thought could play, Malik Benson, DJ Uiagalelei, Roydell Williams, getting Patrick Payton to stay put. I thought that they would be monsters. I thought that they would be great. Instead, it's been slide and slide and slide. Now, Southern Methodist looks more like the Florida State that we thought the Florida State was going to be than Florida State. We're talking about Duke ascending and Florida State falling. We're talking about Georgia Tech being decent. We're talking about Syracuse being fun. We're talking about Boston College being worth a damn, while Florida State can't do nothing. And meanwhile, you would say, man, maybe it's just topsy-turvy. No, Clemson's still good. Clemson's great. Miami's undefeated. I don't know what Mike Norvell is going to do or what Florida State plans to do, but I do want to just reiterate this if y'all don't already know. Coach Prime first wanted to coach at Florida State. He called up Mickey Andrews saying when that job came open and Mike Norvell hadn't yet got it, I would like it. And Mickey Andrews did him a solid. He called Dave Coburn up, and Coburn said, look, I don't think I can get past anybody's going to be paying no money because he ain't graduate. Need to get that dude to graduate. Need to get that dude some coaching experience. Got some coaching experience at Jackson State. Has some coaching experience at Colorado. Probably going to have a couple first-round draft picks in the quarterback in Shedeur Sanders and the wide receiver defensive back in Travis Hunter. That job comes open. I know that he has said he's happy at Colorado and he likes being at Colorado. But home is home. And he's from Florida. He's from Fort Myers. He went to Florida State. He thinks of Florida State as his home. Like, you talk about alumni, you don't think of Talladega as, he went to Talladega, he graduated Talladega, but home is Florida State. I would be curious, man, if Florida State made a move and they went up to his door and said, what would it take? What would it take? And would he still say no? It's open question. But what we've seen from Oregon this year, what we've seen at Florida State this year, one of these is predictable. One of these absolutely positively was not.